got so many things going.
So I'll do the gong after I
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Okay, so we're going to turn to 1023 and or look up here, and we're going to sing Building Bridges. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our visions and all of our voices, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Good morning. Good to see everybody. I'm going to try to remember your names. I'm teasing. I can't forget you. But I can't believe it. I was gone 6 consecutive Sundays in a row. That's a first for me. So thanks for the break. Not a break from you, but just a break in general. It was a good, restful sabbatical. It was too cold to do much, so I didn't. But welcome to everyone to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where we join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. Or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and live justly, work for justice, whichever you prefer. Welcome, as always, to each and every one of you. We embrace all that you bring with you to this space. This includes those of you who are in the room with us for our first service, as well as the many of you who are live streaming with us. And those on Zoom, I'm assuming we have some folks on Zoom. Shelley? Do we? Oh, there they are. Hey, we'll get to you all in just a minute, but let me just mention, I think the only announcement that I have is, and I think this is right, since next Sunday is the third Sunday of the month. Am I right about that? Yeah. It should be our monthly potluck. So hope for those who are here who want to maybe come to the second service and go to the potluck, or come here and then come back for the potluck. That's always a fun time and get to visit with one another. At least those who can make it. I know a lot of you folks who are live streaming or Zooming with us are distant folks and can't make it, but you'd always be more than welcome if you can. So with that, let's turn to the folks on Zoom here. There you go. Joyce, it looks like I see you up in the top corner, so you must be the central
I am
figure.
hosting today. Hello. We've got a better crowd than I thought, because many of us have to wake up an hour early here on the West Coast, but we're here and glad to be here and glad you're back.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. It's good to see all of you again. I have to turn my head a bit to actually look at you, but it's a small enough group today that I can actually at least see all of your friendly, warm faces. So that's a wonderful welcome back too. So greetings to one and all. And I don't know if you can see some of the folks here in the sanctuary are waving at you too. So of course they're waving at the TV. But if you wave at the camera, they'll actually see you if you wave at the camera there. So there you go. All right. Well, thank you all so much for welcoming me back. You know, there hasn't gone not much has gone on in the world while I was away, so it's not like you needed me here to. No, I know it has been a daily surprises. I think I'll put it that way to be polite, and sometimes shocking and obviously worrying. I'm imagining a lot of you, like me, have a lot of anxiety about what's going to happen next and what's going to go on in the world and how things might turn out. And that's probably not going to change. So we're going to be experiencing that for some time. I'll probably, truly be addressing that in many ways in my sermon, but my way of approaching it is one through the sort of Stoic practice, right, where we just have to acknowledge there are some things in our control and some things not in our control, and we should focus on the things that are within our power or within our potential power to change. And most of us tend to obsess about the things we can't change. And that just puts us in an unproductive cycle of worry and anxiety and frustration and anger and all those things that go along with it. So, but there is a lot that we can affect, whether it's the people around us, the lives around us, or even larger situations. We do have some power and a voice in those sort of things. So that's the first thing, is to be stoic and recognize we are in it. The other thing I think is really, really important to remember is there's no going back to normal. And that's not because of the political situation in the world. The political situation in the world is a symptom of being part of a moment in history of such exponential change that it is difficult for our species to keep up with. For any species, really, because all creatures are creatures of habit. So we want to move slowly into the future. And the future is just literally pouring itself upon us faster than it has ever done. And so that means we have to become flexible. We have to figure out how to be agile as possible in this era of rapid change. And I think it's only going to come quicker. I mean, the predictions are the next 20 years will make the last 100 look like the last 1,000. It's really, really coming down on us. So if you enjoy roller coasters, look at it like a ride that you're on, and But the reason I say that is not to be more discouraging, but to recognize that the skills for living in that kind of world are, again, agility, flexibility, adoption of change, recognition of change, being able to deal with the ups and downs and the twists and the turns. And it is the rigidity that will cause us to fracture as societies, as individuals, emotionally, psychologically. So I don't want to give much more of a sermon than that, but I did want to address, it's not even the elephant in the room, it's the room that we're in now, right? It's the reality we're in. So those would be my tips. That's what I attempt to do. And also, maybe look for the positive things that can come from this. Sometimes we have to hit rock bottom before we can really, really make a change. Right now, everybody is doing what we've been doing as a species most of our existence, and that's trying to establish the one idea that will save us all. And if only we can force our one idea, the right idea, on everybody, we'll all be happy. And in that process, we make ourselves miserable and we make others miserable. So it is really only the periods in which that kind of thinking has led to injustice, brutality, disaster, that everybody said, well, wait a minute, whew, I gotta step out of the ring for a minute. Let's try this toleration thing, which is really what my sermon will be about more later. So I'll take it from there. But that's another, you know, there's hope in getting to the point where we have to change. Because what we've been doing, which clearly has not been working, becomes clear that it's not working. And we've got to do things differently. Okay, so you're among friends, whether you're here, whether you're live streaming or Zooming with us, so let's take, as is our tradition, a moment or two to greet one another, those of you who are here this morning, and please don't be shy. It's been so long, I thought we'd already moved into social hour. I apologize for just standing. I was just standing there aimlessly. But I do remember, speaking of social hour, as always, there's more opportunity to visit during that time. So please stay for that. But let's move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
Our opening reflection this morning is a passage from the book The Constitution of Knowledge, A Defense of Truth by Jonathan Rauch, published in 2021. A functioning society depends on our ability to engage with ideas we dislike, even find offensive. The reality of intellectual pluralism means that no one has a monopoly on truth, and knowledge is best refined through open debate and rigorous scrutiny. Yet today, we see an increasing tendency to silence dissenting views rather than engage with them. Whether through cancel culture, ideological purity tests, or the spread of misinformation, people are incentivized to conform rather than question. The problem is that a society that values social conformity over intellectual diversity risks becoming an echo chamber of self-reinforcing beliefs. Without the willingness to engage in the marketplace of ideas, we undermine the very mechanisms that lead to progress. Truth is not determined by consensus or popularity, but by a process of open inquiry, correction, and revision. The more we shield ourselves from opposing views, the weaker our understanding becomes. If we wish to preserve a free and open society, we must cultivate resilience, the ability to listen, to question, and to tolerate disagreement without resorting to suppression or outrage.
Okay, you can turn to 352 and find a stillness. I think these are good action words. Find a stillness, hold a stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit given power, I will find true harmony. Seek the essence, hold the essence, let the essence carry me. Let me flower, help me flower, watch me flower, carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
We'll now kindle our candles of care for those who are on our hearts and minds. Incidentally, Joni Nelson's, longtime church member, Joni Nelson's memorial service was here yesterday, and they left these flowers for us as a gift, and I think it helps remember her. So I'm going to light a candle in her memory as well as on behalf of her lifelong partner Sue and their family, who are really grieving her loss, as are many of us. Joni was an incredibly loving, kind, and fun force person in our lives. But we'll also light a candle, as we have been for too long, on behalf of the people of Ukraine and that region of the world that are suffering from the war and violence there, and now really just a lot of anxiety and uncertainty about what's going to happen next. And also for the people of Israel and the Palestinian people who, likewise, particularly Palestinians who live in the Gaza Strip or lived in the Gaza Strip, are wondering what the hell's going to happen with them. So we continue to think about these folks and people around the world that are suffering at this time. And let's do take a moment of silence on behalf of those you might be thinking of, and as always, you're welcome to name them aloud if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. And we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which helps sustain this community and our mission to the larger world. Jackie, this is my first day back. I was supposed to be the center of attention today. You're not supposed to steal the show today. I'm teasing. That was wonderful. Hey, do be careful. We don't want you to break that piano, though, okay? Because can't afford a new one right now, so take it easy, would you? I'm teasing, man. Amazing. Thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I want to come back to. Man, thank you. So good. Oh, we are so fortunate. I'll save that for the second service because I want to say a little more. I was so moved by Lynn's opening reading. You know, I think another thing moment in history, and let me define liberalism real quickly, because we are a religion that emerged out of the Enlightenment, at least Western Unitarianism is. Eastern Unitarianism, which emerged in the 16th century, came out of the Renaissance, so very closely akin to the same ideologies. Renaissance led to the Enlightenment. But we are a religion based on Enlightenment liberalism. And in short, that is fundamentally its belief is in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. That every person has value and should have autonomy and whatnot over their own lives and destiny, and should not be imposed upon by others or the government in a way that blocks that. So the technologies for maintaining that dignity are freedom to speak and think for yourself, as well as the freedom to participate in society without being opposed or discriminated against. And reason, which is hopefully thinking well, but also trusting that others can think for themselves, right? They don't need an authority to say, here's what the state line is, right? Here's what the church doctrine is. Here's what the common creed is, or common sense is. And that you should be able to think for yourself. So if you disagree with me, that's okay, because that's what human dignity is about. And then finally is tolerance, which means to allow that people are going where we do disagree and don't reason alike, that we live and let live, and make sure that not only do we not infringe upon the rights of those we disagree with, but we stand up for those rights. That in short is what liberalism is. I mean, there's other things like a commitment to science, which is part of reason, and sort of a universalism, right? We believe that there's a universal common humanity. We believe in a universal truth. We may not know what that truth is, but what is true everywhere, that kind of thing. So saying that, one of the things I would want to remind us of is even as a liberal religion, there are a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump. Donald Trump won the popular vote, and I'm very confident that there are individuals among us who voted for Donald Trump. Yeah, not many, not as many as in the general public, but there are. I know there are, and the ones who I know are very smart, good-hearted, open-minded people, right? So you have to have a conversation if you run into those folks about, well, why did you vote for Donald Trump? But more importantly, I just want to say that. So as we are critical, and by the way, we should be critical. Tolerance doesn't mean we don't say things that offend people. Tolerance means we can say things that offend people. We should be able to say what we believe. That's what tolerance is, and we should be able to get along despite that. But I just don't want us all to take it for granted that everyone among us thinks alike or votes alike, okay? Because that's not the case. And so we should be honest, not offensive, direct, not attacking in how we engage. But more importantly, I think there is this real tendency right now to blindly get caught up in the sort of liberal perspective when it comes to anything that Donald Trump does. Right? There's sort of this knee-jerk reaction. Well, that must be wrong because Donald Trump is doing it or that administration is doing it. And we've got to be clear thinkers. That's where thinking well comes in. And I'll give you just one example that I've seen happening very commonly almost since this started. Is the liberal media, I hate to say the liberal media because that was an invention by Ronald Reagan, but sadly, some media has actually become liberal and some has become very conservative. That's the world we now live in, right? Instead of trying to be unbiased, they actually choose a side. So the more liberal, MSNBC, CNNs, that kind of thing, often preface Elon Musk's name with the unelected Elon Musk, an unelected person who runs Doge, an unelected, as if this is somehow anomalous. We didn't elect him. Why is he making these decisions? Did we elect any of President Trump's cabinet positions? Of course not. We're complaining that they're firing federal employees to do government jobs. Did we elect those federal employees to do government jobs? Of course not. So that's an extreme form of bias that tries to prejudice us or be critical of, sort of make a claim that just by Elon Musk making decisions is inherently wrong because we didn't elect him. Right? That's bad, inconsistent thinking. And those are the kinds of things we get dragged into real easily if we let our biases and our emotions get in the way and we start to think unfairly and jump on the bandwagon sort of thinking, here's how we're supposed to feel. So I think we've got to give people a break and try to think as well as possible. That's not a lesson, a children's lesson, but I think it's a necessary lesson for us. Again, another potential rule of thumb as we move forward to stop and think about what you're hearing and does it really make sense. Okay.
As we move into a time of meditation, I invite you to find a comfortable position. Close your eyes if you wish. Take a few deeper breaths and reflect on this quote from Nobel Peace Prize laureate Kofi Annan in his book Interventions: A Life in War and Peace. If you have a problem and you can't find a solution, you meet again tomorrow and you keep talking until you find a solution. You can disagree with behavior or a particular position, but you do not resort to calling an opponent worthless.
waiting for the welfare dime because they can't buy a job. The man in the silk suit hurries by as he catches the poor old lady's eyes. Just for fun, he says, get a job. That's just the way it is. Some things will never change. That's just the way it is. Oh, but don't you believe it? Said, hey, little boy, you can't go where the others go because you don't look like they do. Well, said, hey, old man, how can you stand to think that way? Did you really think about it before you made the rules? He said, son, that's just the way it is. Some things will never change. That's just the way it is. Ah, but don't you believe that? Well, they passed a law at 64 to give those who ain't got a little more, but it only goes so far, because the law don't change on another's mind when all you see is at the hiring time is the line on the color bar. No, that's just the way it is. Some things will never change. That's just the way it is. Well, that's just the way it is, it is, it is, it is. And that's just the way it is. Some things will never change, and that's just the way it is. Oh, but don't believe them.
Well, thank you both again. That was just incredibly timely and moving, and beautifully put. I mean, beautifully sung, performed. Yeah. So, united we fall, divided we stand. Not a misprint. The more familiar phrase, united we stand, divided we fall, has been around at least as far back as when Aesop used it in the moral of his story about 4 oxen and the lion. Do you know that one? One of the more obscure ones. The oxen survived the lion's frequent attacks by turning their tails to one another so that it always confronts horns no matter what direction it approaches from. But after quarreling amongst themselves and separating, the lion soon puts an end to all of them. That was the story. And the moral of the story, united we stand, divided we fall, has been around ever since to encourage unity, especially among groups, large and small, struggling together for some common cause like war or national freedom or individual freedom or labor rights or voting rights and so forth. And this idea is sometimes attributed to Abraham Lincoln, who once gave a speech in the Spirit in which he quoted the Gospel of Mark, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." And there's a similar verse in Matthew that says, "Every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand." So these verses show this assumption that people must be united if they are going to endure is ancient and widespread. And it's a powerful idea, but paradoxically, it is almost always used to encourage solidarity among one group by being divided against another. It is a call for unity among insiders by dividing or distinguishing themselves from outsiders. It is the idea that those who are not for us are against us. So it isn't really about the greater principle of unity that it sounds like, but about struggling together against a common foe. Such unity needs an enemy and is thus actually rooted in division. And with such a limited purpose, any unity resulting from such motivation will be temporary. Once the common threat ends, the unity will soon end with it, and the group that had been held together by the threat will start to separate. Perhaps to the point of smaller internal groups uniting to stand against those with whom they had once been united. Sound familiar? Just a few weeks ago, Justin Trudeau, Canada's Prime Minister since 2015, announced his impending resignation. Trudeau, leader of the nation's Liberal Party, had become extremely unpopular, and the polls indicated this very strong likelihood that Canada would elect its own version of a Donald Trump-like conservative populist in Trudeau's place. But in just a short time, after Trump's insulting remarks and attacks against their sovereignty and their economy, Canadians have become unified around their national identity. Canada first, with their chief nemesis being the American president and his government, so far not Americans, but the American president and his government. Fed up with Trump, and anyone who thinks, talks, or acts like him has flipped the polls, which almost assure that the next Canadian Prime Minister will again be from the Liberal Party. The question is, what happens to their sense of unity and nationalism if and once the Trump threat ends? Will Canadian society return to the kind of political division that is typical of most Western nations these days? United we stand, divided we fall also implies that to be united, everyone must be on the same page. They must agree and think alike. It is a call for authoritarianism and groupthink. Every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. When played out, this has historically meant there must be a head of the household, a chain of command, a sovereign authority who cannot be questioned, hail to the king. Under such circumstances, we will lose the right to think and speak and act for ourselves, either by fear or by force, or in the case of Putin's Russia and with Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un of North Korea, or worse, by choice. Because in order to feel we belong and are part of something larger than ourselves, we simply stop thinking for ourselves and blindly and cultishly follow and obey whoever is in charge. sadly often mistaking that their mind and their will is ours. There's something instinctive in us that wants to join with others by becoming obedient. Just as we are trained and taught from the very beginning of our lives to obey our parents, for example, to listen to our teachers, to follow the rules, to abide by the laws. This is how we can ensure we will be loved and rewarded and accepted by others and our society. In his book on disobedience, social psychologist Erich Fromm wrote, "The child just expresses itself, but from the first day of its life onward, it is filled with an unholy respect for conformity, with the fear of being different, with the fright of being away from the rest of the herd." If most of the rules imposed upon us in childhood are with the intention of keeping us safe from harm, be they legitimate, like look both ways before you cross the street, or foolishness, like believe in Jesus or you will go to hell, then we are also likely to grow to believe that doing what is expected of us will keep us safe and guarantee our place in society. But this type of unity with others is a double-edged sword because it requires us to relinquish much of our power to think and to question. Freedom and the capacity for disobedience are inseparable, Fromm says. Freedom and the capacity for disobedience are inseparable. At this point in history, the capacity to doubt and to disobey may be all that stands before a future of mankind and the end of civilization, he wrote. Perhaps we see such an end happening today in the good old USA, which contains the principle of unity within its very name. It also refers to the maintenance of now 50 separate states. The United States of America. In these 50 states, further in the country they belong to, are considered separate from the 35 other countries that are also in America, which together contain nearly 15% of the world's population. The United States represents just over 4% of the world's population, yet we have chosen a xenophobic and authoritarian leader who promises America first, just 4.3% of the population first, even at the exclusion of those outsiders who were only a few days ago among our greatest allies. It's become difficult to believe that the United States of America has ever been sincerely devoted to the principle of unity. It has a 250-year history, of fighting to separate or to maintain its separation. It has succeeded best at this when facing a common external foe, proving victorious in the American Revolution, 2 world wars, and the threat of nuclear annihilation during the Cold War. But it has also been torn apart throughout its history with much civil unrest, including a brutal civil war, and today continues to experience domestic conflict and terrorism over its old patterns of segregation and inequalities based around race and sex and class. And because other people who share this same continent have sought to come to the USA in pursuit of a better life, maintaining the integrity of U.S. borders has remained a constant struggle, so worrisome to some that it was a major reason Donald Trump was elected to his second term as the nation's president. He was elected, that is, based on his promise to segregate us from the world. Not upon the principle of unity, unless it is merely to be united with him by giving him our minds and our wills, which he commonly refers to as a love fest. Right? The historic struggle between state rights and federal authority has also escalated since this grand experiment began in 1776, when its citizens successfully united against British rule. The U.S. Constitution is a delicate agreement protecting the rights and a certain degree of autonomy from the federal government. States can choose their own kind of government, and any powers not given to the federal government are reserved for the states. And each state, no matter how small its population, has the same number of U.S. senators, allowing those representing a minority to band together and overrule those representing a majority of the nation's citizens. And there were only 13 states when that agreement was made. Today there are 50. Trump's shooting for a 51st. Don't think he'll get it. And that means that we are now a nation of 50 different governments, a nation with multiple dividing lines. During his inaugural speech in 1980, President Ronald Reagan, the man who had been elected to run the federal government, said, "Government is not the solution to our problem, government is the problem." And the Republican Party has ever since worked to weaken federal programs and regulations, to reduce taxes, and to prevent spending on most new programs, no matter how vital they are to the welfare and protection of ordinary citizens, as well as to the health of our states. The U.S. has the most expensive healthcare system on the planet, despite millions of its citizens remaining underinsured or completely uninsured. Despite being the second largest producer of greenhouse gases in the world, though less than 5% of the global population, the U.S. has done little to nothing to address this existential threat, this global existential threat. Today, in just his first weeks back in office, President Trump's actions have been directed toward the sole purpose of dismantling the federal government by firing millions of federal employees across the board and attempting to weaken or entirely eliminate some agencies, like USAID, the agency responsible for helping those outside the U.S. borders, to the Education Department, which assures public schools are following the laws meant to protect students and teachers from discrimination and that guarantee education to those with disabilities, among other responsibilities. Trump even wants to eliminate paper straws and return completely to plastic straws, further just thumbing his nose at even the smallest attempt to protect our planet and our nation from the terrible impacts of climate change that every state in the U.S. is now experiencing, as well as countries around the world. All of this suggests that including the principle of unity in the U.S.'s very name is more about maintaining its separation from the rest of the world, and often from one another. Today, as the White House eviscerates federal programs and threatens to withhold assistance to those states whose governments it disagrees with, the states of America may have to find novel ways to fend for themselves. For futurist Paul Sappho, a technology forecasting and consulting professor in the School of Engineering at Stanford University, this situation has long been foreseeable. During a 2007 lecture, for example, Sappho predicted that there's less than a 50% chance that the United States will exist by the middle of this century. I heard him repeat this claim myself during a 2020 lecture, and I won't go into his reasons for this forecast now, but will only point out that it's now 2025, which means, if he is correct, we should be seeing the signs of its demise right now. So I'll leave it up to you to determine if you do or don't. In recent years, however, I've been surprised by how intolerant even many liberals are toward the idea of tolerance. On the one hand, we now have those on the extreme left attacking the reputations, the character, the motives, and even the livelihoods of anyone who questions their ideas and particular approaches to social justice. They use ad hominem fallacies rather than engage in rational discussions about their claims, probably because their claims are not logically defensible to begin with. On the other hand, there are those who complain that tolerance just doesn't go far enough, that fully embrace our differences. And in my view, this is irrational too. Why? Firstly, because there are more than 8 billion people in the world, making it impossible for anyone to have the time to fully understand where everyone they might encounter is coming from. Secondly, how can we be expected to fully embrace every belief that we encounter, even if we could understand everyone? I need only cite a few examples. Nazism, white nationalism, reducing inflation with tariffs, using plastic. Everybody have to of the ideas that we encounter because they are bad ideas. Is one of the few defining principles of liberalism. It is difficult to claim that we are liberal if we are not in support of tolerance. Although the saying live and let live has much earlier roots, for example, it only became prominent in English during the Enlightenment, when liberalism was born. Prior to this, tolerance throughout most of human history, and sadly in much of the world today, people have believed that holding different beliefs would lead to civil unrest and conflict, and that calling for tolerance is akin to disloyalty and a call for anarchy. It's been only after long periods of brutality and bloodshed during failed attempts to maintain but one idea, one religion, one political perspective, that some have dared to utter this forbidden possibility: tolerance. Maybe we should give it a try. The Unitarians were ahead of the curve, becoming the first religion in history to enact a religious tolerance law, the Edict of Torda, in 1568 during the Renaissance. Sadly, the Unitarian king of Transylvania who enacted it, this edict, died soon thereafter. The Catholics then took his throne and passed a new anti-innovation law, making it illegal to express any new ideas about religion or new religious ideas, resulting in the arrest and imprisonment of Unitarian Bishop Ferenc David, architect of the Edict of Torda, who died in a dungeon beneath the castle of Diva only 6 months later. It would be another century during the Enlightenment that societies and nations would reconsider the taboo notion of tolerance. Live and let live. In the U.S., this eventually resulted in its own such edict, right? The First Amendment of its Constitution. Congress shall make no laws respecting the establishment of a religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. 175 years later, the principle would be reiterated to expand in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, banning discrimination practices in employment, and ending segregation in public places such as swimming pools, libraries, and most importantly, public schools. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act was then passed, banning discriminatory practices that prevented black people from voting, especially in southern states. Later still, in response to the assassination of Dr. King, another such law was enacted prohibiting discrimination in housing based on race and religion and sex and national origin and disability. Edicts of toleration. And notice that all of these efforts to create a tolerant society began with laws, not love. During a 1965 speech at UCLA, Dr. King brilliantly said, "It may be true that you can't legislate integration, but you can legislate desegregation. It may be true that morality cannot be legislated, but behavior can be regulated. It may be true that the law cannot change the heart, but it can restrain the heartless. It may be true that the law can't make a man love me, but it can restrain him from lynching me." And I think that's pretty important also. That's what makes tolerance such an important and practical principle, because it can be enforced. It doesn't have to be felt. And of course, people break rules and laws all the time. I'm not saying anything's perfect, right? But making murder illegal should cut down on murder. Making discrimination illegal should cut down on discriminatory practices. It's a social tool meant to keep the peace, even if we don't understand nor love nor even like each other. Over time, as we find ourselves living in the same neighborhoods, going to the same schools, shopping in the same stores, eating in the same restaurants, drinking from the same water fountains, and working together in the same jobs, we will discover that our differences really aren't that important, and that as human beings, we all deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, and that we have far more in common than not. Hopefully, over time, we will even come to befriend and love one another. But such love is not required. We just have to live and let live. We only have to tolerate each other. It's simple. It's not hard. In a world of differences, toleration is far more useful and practical than love. It's proven by the failure of Christianity to establish heaven on earth after 2,000 years of claiming that God is love and that we must love one another. In his 2000 book In Defense of Enlightenment, Tzvetan Todorov says that during the European Age of Enlightenment, the status of our differences were taken as a basis of unity. The status of our differences were taken as our basis of unity, not isolating one attribute to impute on all. This could be done, he said, by fostering tolerance and emulation, the free exercise of the critical spirit, and the self-detachment that enables individuals to see things from another's standpoint and attain thereby a level of generality that includes both viewpoints, or maybe even all viewpoints. Yet he goes on to remind us this understanding is not a gift from heaven. It came with a high price tag. Before being the continent that embodies tolerance and mutual recognition, Europe was the site of painful divisions, murderous conflicts, and incessant wars. This long experience, etched in its memory, in its narratives, in its buildings, and even in its landscapes, is the tribute it had to pay to be able to benefit many years later from peace. After visiting enlightened England, Voltaire once remarked, "Were there but one religion in England, its despotism would be fearful. Were there but two, they would cut each other's throats. But there are 30, and they live in peace and happiness." In contrast, Todorov notes that China, once inventive and creative, was thwarted by the emergence of one unified empire, where minds were dulled by the uncontested reign of authority. Contrary to the old saying, he says, here it is division. In division that there is strength. Here it is in division that there is strength. All of this leads me to my main point, that we must flip the script. It is not by being united that we stand, but by being divided. By recognizing and accepting that is that we live in a world of differences. And it is our ideas of unity and sameness, and worse, our attempts to force everyone around us to accept our ideas and beliefs about truth, politics, religion, justice, and so forth that produces the hate and hostility, the conflict and injustice, and that prevents us from progressing and achieving humanity's greatest potential. Right? The Fox News and the MSNBCs of the world do not help. Dr. King did not dream of a world where we all march in lockstep, like some great military force directed by one command, one mind, one uncontested reign of authority. He understood that we must join hands and walk together with those who are different from us if we are truly going to progress and establish a more peaceful and just society and world for everyone. He understood that the rigidity that comes with unity eventually causes a society to shatter, as is happening today. And that it is by accepting our differences, by tolerating one another, and to live and let live, think and let think, speak and let think, or speak and let speak, I should say, that we shall prosper and endure. Thank you. Thank you.
This little light of mine. We'll just do the first. Second side.
I did go on a little, didn't I?
Yeah, that's all right. Or we'll do 1 and 3. I think that's what's on there anyways. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. 3, building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
For our benediction today, here are some words of guidance to take us out into the world from Religion for Atheists by Alain de Botton. Forgive others. Be slow to anger. Dare to imagine things from another's point of view, and set your dramas in perspective. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.
not like a big thing either. Like, pretty smaller than Washington.
And this is
Still, like, I mean, that's happening. I remember, like, it was just like a couple of years ago, we were talking about how, well, years like 30 years ago, you get this which isn't to say that the global south is happy here. Like I heard about there's this, I forget which country it is, but it's like island nation, and they're like buying from other island nations. They have like it's an archipelago, and there's one other country, it's just like 2 islands, and like they're gonna be underwater by like 2030. And so like they have to like
so 10 hours. This is 10 hours. New York governor, Thursday, we're supposed to go back to Russia.
Like, how many fires is it? Like, is it just one fire?
No, there's brush fires in this
Oh my god. And so it all happened all came back here. That's I've just been wondering as I was going around here, because I was just like eating tires over here. It's like I got off the bus down by my place the other day, and it's like I smelled like fire. But it's probably it's kind of late in the year for a heating fire. Yeah, I know. It's like, yeah, I know. The forests they will burn down, and the forests are going to be left, and the cities are grid. So I mean, to grid authority. I mean, like, cut down those. And it's like there's just like a handful of people that make money off of all of the gas and oil, and it's like it hurts the earth to pump it out, and it hurts the earth to use it. I mean, there's like all the accidents that and then like explosions and fires and stuff. I mean, this is the end result that they make money. So we have to, like, everybody else has to suffer, like, little poor kids in our island nation, like, in the middle of the ocean, like, definitely